Bigfoot, often called Sasquatch, is a creature that cryptozoologists allege to be an ape-like creature living in the forests of North America. Many questionable articles have been presented to prove the existence of Bigfoot, including reports of sightings, as well as videos, audio recordings, photographs, and casts of large footprints. However, many of the supposed pieces of evidence were later found to be hoaxes. Tales of wild and hairy humanoids exist in many cultures throughout the world. These are just a few examples. A few years back, I went on a week-long backpacking trip in Utah. I spent my last 2 nights near Granddaddy Lake. Before I entered the basin, I encountered 2 guys heading the opposite direction who informed me that they had been there for 4 days without seeing another person. They also mentioned that it was very quiet there. Upon arriving in the basin, I noticed that it was eerily quiet, with not much wildlife to be seen or heard, including birds. Anyway, the first night and the next day were uneventful. I hiked the perimeter of the lake, never encountering anyone else. The next day, a storm passed through the area, driving the temperature low enough that it actually snowed and stuck to the ground. I hunkered down in my tent for the night as soon as the sun dipped behind the peaks. At about 2:30 a.m., I was awakened by a loud knocking noise to what seemed to be the north of my camp. It took me a second to focus my attention, then I heard what was an unmistakable whoop coming from the same direction. I laid in my sleeping bag quietly. Then I heard another whoop that seemed to be coming from further north. This was followed by a reply from what I guess was the original individual. This went on for about 15 minutes, each time the sound drifting further north. Eventually, it went quiet again. Needless to say, I didn't sleep well for the rest of the night. I had to be on the trail early the next morning to get back to my car, so I didn't have a chance to look around for any physical evidence. I'm not saying it was Bigfoot, but I've never heard anything like that before. Big Sur is a mountainous region in south-central California located on the edge of the Los Padres National Forest. It spans nearly 3,000 square miles and overlooks the Pacific Ocean to the west. Me and 3 friends planned to drive to a secluded spot in Big Sur, known as Top of the World. This area of Big Sur was rarely visited by people, except for occasional vehicle traffic from locals or the occasional tourist or hiker during the day. The place was uninhabited at night, except for critters like bobcats, foxes, even the occasional mountain lion. This made it the perfect location for 4 party animals. We drove down the Pacific Coast Highway and turned onto the Old Coast Road, which winds up into the mountains. It's a hard-packed dirt road, and it's really one of the few ways in and out of Big Sur. Our spot, the Top of the World, was right off the old dirt road, had an amazing view of the Pacific Ocean. Unfortunately, the party we planned never started because of what happened that night. My friend Steve parked his car at the base of the incline leading to our spot. We grabbed some beers out of the hatchback and walked halfway up the very steep incline. We were sitting next to each other in a row facing the Pacific Ocean. Behind us was the crest of the hill, about 15 yards up, beyond which was the dark and foreboding forest. We just looked out at the Pacific, talked a little, just took in the beautiful view while sipping our beers. We got quiet and maybe a bit reflective. It was beautiful. All of a sudden, we all looked at each other, and without speaking a word, we looked behind us at the top of the hill. Not 15 yards away was a creature. It simply stood there, observing us. This being was not human. It just stood there, completely upright, with its arms to the side facing in our direction. I couldn't tell whether or not it was looking at us because of the lighting conditions and the angle. I only saw the outline of a head and a body, a very hairy head and body that was dark in color. There were no facial features that I can recall. There was very long hair flowing down from the head, but there was an opening where a face must have been. All I saw was darkness between the hair on the head. No eyes or other facial features. The head hair seemed to flow down and mix with the rest of the hairy body. I distinctly remember the arms. They were long, but they did seem to fit the size of the body. I don't recall them being overly long like an ape, but they also had long flowing hair, as did the torso and legs. The creature was tall, maybe 7 feet tall, but that could have been because we were looking up at it. It was also wide looking. It gave me the impression of great strength. It made absolutely no sound. We ran, but I stumbled and fell due to the steep incline. The others made it to the car before me. Instead of trying to get in, I jumped into the open hatchback. My friend Steve quickly started the car and gunned it. We only made it 2 corners away before Steve lost control. We went sliding over the side of a cliff. Fortunately, the first 20 yards of the drop were gradual and overgrown with thick underbrush. Once the car stopped, we all climbed out, feeling grateful and thanking our lucky stars. We then climbed back up to the road. At this point, we had a decision to make. Go back the direction we had come from, back to the highway, only a 3-mile hike. However, that way would have taken us past the last place we saw that creature. We chose to walk in the opposite direction, which was 5 times longer, but would hopefully keep us away from any danger. It took us hours to make it to the highway, but we finally did, alive and healthy with a story to share. When I was around 9 years old, my father would spend nights at my grandmother's trailer in a holler with an old blacktopped road that passed by our place, connecting to another holler where a neighbor lived. My grandfather had purchased the trailer when my father was a kid in the late 60s and had planted 2 peach trees on the left side of the trailer's yard. My grandfather was a godly man who contracted cancer in the late 80s. He lived with the disease until he passed away in 2007 at the age of 80. After my grandfather's death, my grandmother lived alone in the trailer. She began to complain about someone banging on the trailer walls at night, keeping her up. This would happen for nights on end, and then stop for a while, only to start again. The knocking became so bad that my father had to stay with her at night because she was terrified. Even when he was there, the knocking would start. My father would grab my grandfather's shotgun and open the front door, only to find nothing there. One night, my aunt was staying with my grandmother and father at the trailer. They heard a commotion at the back door. My father grabbed a light and went outside. He saw a gigantic, all-black creature walking down the slope leading to the road beside the house. He followed it all the way to the road and saw that its eyes were glowing red. The creature walked into the woods by the road. My father returned to the trailer looking as if he had seen something beyond the realm of science fiction. This story came up again last week when my aunt was visiting. She suggested that the knocking might have been caused by deer coming onto the porch at night. However, the knocking was loud enough to wake up my grandmother and father while they were staying the night. And if it were deer, it would have been a more quiet and muffled thump rather than a loud banging. Who knows?